third one. You know, it's really weird. When you think about the United States being different sections, north, south, and west, and you think about the reasons they are different, okay? Obviously, when you go back, you're talking about slavery, things like this, okay? It's confusing that there weren't more compromises to solve these problems. Actually, there aren't that many. The first big one was that one, okay? This is the one that solved the nullification crisis. And you know it's got to be fun because Andrew Jackson was involved. This compromise was pretty much a mandate on states' rights. And guys, if it's a mandate on states' rights, it's a mandate on the 10th Amendment. Please understand what the 10th is, because, guys, we're going to start talking about civil rights pretty soon in the Cold War 1960s, and the 10th Amendment is still a major issue. It was a major issue in Brown versus Board. So when you have the 10th Amendment, okay, you've got something that is a divisive issue in American history. What the 10th says is when you look at the Constitution is your owner's manual, okay? And it gives the federal government tons and tons of powers. But it doesn't give the federal government all the power. So the powers that aren't in the Constitution for the federal government are reserved to the states. That's a big deal. Okay, that's how they're going to preserve that state autonomy that they had in the colonial time. Remember how Jefferson and Madison issued the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions? Okay, that's all coming to play right here. You can sit in all these resolutions you want to, and all the rhetoric you want to, but until something happens that puts it to the test, it's just rhetoric. This is what happened. Okay. This compromise is going to settle the nullification crisis. Guys, we're going to talk about the nullification crisis in another one of these sessions, so we're not going to go into it a whole lot today. But it is the essence of compromise. Very briefly, okay, just to bring you up to date, okay? When John Quincy Adams left the presidency, okay, in 1828, he was defeated by Andrew Jackson. He just had to get one more dig in. He just had to get one last shot at Jackson, okay? So, he jacked the tariff up, all right? Tariff hurts Southerners, big time. So he jacks the tariff up, and then he goes about his business. In South Carolina, John C. Calhoun, okay, says, we ain't going to pay it. We're not going to pay that tariff. It hurts us. We don't care what Northerners think. We don't care if it's making them money. The tariff hurts our state. Okay? So we refuse to do it. We're going to nullify the tariff. Okay? Against any other president, that probably would have been okay. But Jackson don't play that game. Okay? So Jackson says, no, you are going to obey federal law. And you're going to obey this tariff. Okay? When he says that, Calhoun comes back at him. He writes this long thing called the South Carolina Exposition and Protest, and he says, if you try to make us pay this tariff, we'll secede from the Union. And we have the right to. We have the right to because there's nothing in the Constitution that says we can't. We'll invoke the 10th Amendment. Now you got a crisis. Now you got a crisis. South Carolina believes they're within their rights. And guys, by the law of the land, they do. According to the 10th Amendment, they're right. Okay? So they're threatening to secede. Jackson gets mad, as Jackson is wont to do. So he gets a bill passed through Congress called the Force Bill. And the Force Bill says, if you do not stop all this junk about secession, I will take the U.S. Army, I'll march into your state, and I will force you to stay in the Union. Remember that document on the test that said he's going to start hanging people from trees? Okay? That's Jackson, and he means it. Okay? So now you got a standoff. If South Carolina invokes the 10th Amendment and tries to secede, Andrew Jackson will bring the Army in and force them to stay in. Okay? That causes a problem that you may never get rid of. Okay? So this is when the heads of state were at fullest. Okay? What dissipated this whole thing was this compromise. Okay? Guys, usually, and for God's sakes, when you get married, you'll find this out. All right? Usually when you have two people with ideas of their own, and they're both bullheaded, and neither one's going to back down, okay, That's when it gets at its worst. That's when people say things they shouldn't say. And it gets you in trouble and basically makes you sleep on the couch. Okay? When it gets like that, somebody's got to be willing to be the adult. Somebody's got to be willing to say, okay, how about we try this? Okay? So, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You've been through some of these. Okay? So, that's what's happening here, okay? Jackson says, what about if we lower the tariff? We're going to keep it there. It's federal law. But why don't we lower it down from that 30-something% down to about 10%? And Calhoun says, we can live with that. Okay? So that's the compromise. The tariff stayed in place, so the North got what they wanted. But it lowered the rate to where South Carolina could live with it without getting hurt. South got what they wanted. That is the essence of compromise. Okay? So everybody gets so far. Understand this. Guys, this is something, I've got to stay on the side of this wheel right here to get picked up here, and I keep wandering off, so that's why she keeps yelling at me. Okay, so guys, listen. This is a perfect example of what compromise is all about. And guys, look, oh my God. Always think in terms of the world you live in today, okay? We live in a situation today which is completely and totally divided by partisanship. Okay, I gave a talk to the Sons of the American Revolution a couple of weeks ago, and the name of the subject was the curse of Madison. And the curse of Madison is what Madison warned us about, we're doing right now. When you get to a point where partisanship is so bad that you refuse to compromise, that's when you have a problem. Okay, this is the way it should be done. Okay, so that's what the lesson is. Anytime you write that in your essay, it's called synthesis. It's a big point. It will get you points. Okay? The great thing about compromises is you can put them in almost anywhere, in almost any essay, especially Madison. Okay, let's go stuff. All right, we just talked about that. Okay, we talked about that. The next one, Crittenden. John Crittenden of Kentucky does not want to see the country go to civil war. Okay? At this point right here, South Carolina and 7 southern states have already seceded. Okay? The Confederate States of America already exist. Okay? And there's a very strong chance that the Union is going to try to supply those soldiers that's left in Fort Sumter. If they do that, the South will fire on them and will be at war. So Crittenden is trying to avert war. That's what he's trying to do here. Okay? And he knows that even though states' rights is the political issue here, the emotional pivot for that issue is slavery. The spread of slavery. Okay? Everybody gets so far. Now, before we go on, think back to Dred Scott. We talked about this the other day. In 1857, Dred Scott said that you cannot pass any law to prevent slaves from going from one state to another. You cannot restrict it. That's the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, okay? So Crittenden's compromise is not intended to be a law. Crittenden's compromise is going to be the basis for a constitutional amendment. That's the only way they can override Dred Scott. So this is him putting the groundwork out there for an amendment, okay? And of course, the great irony is, if it had passed, it would have been the 13th Amendment, okay? So this is what he's saying here. This is a free sort to avert, that's what you need to know. It's an amendment to avoid the war. There were several of these. There was the Corin Amendment. Again, we're going to talk about the Civil War later on also, but keep this in mind, okay? If you are going to try to find a compromise to avoid the Civil War, the one thing you are going to have to do, without a doubt, is make Southerners happy about their slaves. You're not going to get rid of them, okay? It's almost like George Kennan. You can't get rid of them, okay? You can only control it. That's what this is going to do. What Crittenden is saying is the issue is the spread of slavery. Then let's don't let it spread. Let's let Southerners have their slaves where they already have it, in the South. That's where they've always been. Let's just stop the spread of it. So that's what the basis of it was, okay? What you need to understand is this, okay? What they're going to say is we're going to reinstate 3630. Everything below that line, slavery will be legal and protected by constitutional amendment. Everything above that line, no. What he's doing here is he's giving Southerners everything below 3630 where they can expand. And guys, by this time, you're talking about, remember William Walker, the grand man of destiny? You got filibusters going into Mexico. They're trying to capture Central American nations to spread slavery there. The thing about Crittenden is this. It has to be an amendment. It has to be an amendment. If it's not an amendment, it can't overturn Dred Scott. Most Northerners are a little bit lukewarm to it. And guys, the President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, supports it. It's free soil. Okay? The group of people who refused this were the fire eaters, were radical Southerners. Okay? Southerners said, we are the South, we're the Cotton Kingdom, we don't have to agree to anything. And now we're the Confederate States of America. We don't have to do anything or cut any compromise in the United States, and we're saying our slavery can spread everywhere. We don't need the United States. So the reason this thing failed is because the Southerners did not want it, not Northerners. It's the important thing.
Was this before they seceded or after?
After.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this was his compromise to try to get him to come back.
Exactly, try to get them to come back in.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
If you'll come back
To
on
avert
everything-
war, but to reunite
Right.
him. Okay.
Okay, don't worry about that. Has everybody got that stuff?